Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! For background, I am a security guard and travel fully uniformed to and from work by train. Transit security in my city wear green or blue uniforms with transit security written plainly on a chest. I was riding home this morning wearing my noise-cancelling headphones when someone behind me tears them off of my head and starts badgering me. A lady says, "You shouldn't be wearing these at work. Aren't you going to do anything about these bums sleeping in the seats? It's standing room only and I need somewhere to sit." No. Give me back my headphones." "What do you mean no? You're security, so it's your job. Go arrest them or something." "I'm not transit security. Give me back my headphones before I call the cops." "Yes, you are. If you don't do something, I will call the transit security office and you will lose your job. What's your name and badge number?" For background, my company doesn't provide number badges, and even if they did, the number wouldn't be unique to me. I tell her this. "Fine. Then show me your ID. I want your name so I can report you." "Call whoever you want. I'm not going to give you my address, crazy lady." She breaks out the phone and calls transit security, who tell her they will meet her at the next station, and when they arrive they confirm that I do not in fact work for transit security and actually call transit police so that I can press charges on her for stealing my headphones. And I did. One day I was off work, I was craving a sandwich at lunchtime on a hot day. I traveled to the nearest cafe and got in line. As it was noontime, there were quite a few people in line, and at many places, they seemed understaffed. I get that. The young teenage girl was the only one to make sandwiches while a manager was ringing up the orders when not helping with condiments. So while waiting in line with like 6 others, I was behind a group of 3 other ladies, the Karens of the story. While not the spitting image of most Karens, you could tell from how they talked with each other they were the kind of women with resting witch faces. So it came time to have their sandwiches made, and of course every one of them wanted a very custom sandwich. This meat with cheese is a little too much, I wanted it toasted off. That is too much, I want to switch the bread, on and on and on. It was annoying as the one girl tried to keep up but was getting frustrated and stressed. Then the manager stepped over trying to help, but with these women, they were not happy with anything. After 15 minutes of making each of these ladies sandwiches, it finally came time to pay. Down to the register they went as my meatball sub was quickly made and passed down. I'm plain bread, meat and sauce and little ranch. So I waited behind them. The manager rang up the old bats, and when a total came out to around $30-ish, they went off again. I'm not saying that they started to squeal. "We waited forever to be served. And then you two couldn't even make a sandwich. We want it free." They whined. I was fed up with it, and after it continued for a few minutes, I stepped up and said I'd take the sandwiches and add them to mine. The old crows grinned and thought they had one. I paid for the 4 sandwiches now and added my drink and chips. After my card was approved, I was handed my receipt. I picked up my newly bought 4 sandwiches and got my drink. As I started paying, the old ladies went to sit at a table, and after getting my drink, I headed to the door to leave with my food in hand. Excuse me, you still have our food. Aren't you going to bring it to us?" Receipt in hand, holding it up. "Nope, I paid my money for my food. I will take them back to work." As I headed to the door, this got the old witches to get up and chase me out the door, which I didn't mind. The staff had enough of them, and I can take some abuse from crazies. "You need to give us our food or we will call the police on you and have you arrested." I knew this was dumb, but as I said, nothing better on a day off. "Please, be my guest. I assure you that you won't be doing anything about it." One of them started to pull out a phone and call, while the others began telling me how I must love stealing from old ladies and how they knew this person or that person and I will be in jail for a long time. Well, they called. I stood there not saying a word, which is hard to do being belittled, but I had the store crowd watching by this point. Soon enough, a few units pulled in, and as they got out, a look of confusion crossed their faces. The officer says, "Are you the guy they called about because you matched the description?" Yeah, I am what they call in on me. You stole their sandwiches and demanded money from them? Well, look into it. Ask the clerk and the manager and look at this receipt. One officer walked in, spoke with the steward, watched the video while the other listened to these women insinuating that I took the food from them. The shock was priceless once the other came out and confirmed I paid for them. And the store also wanted the 3 trespassed for a disturbance. I was released to leave, but decided to go back in and eat. The 3 were banned and left with an even more sour look, and the manager brought over a cookie, telling me it was on her. So this story takes place like 5 years ago when my husband and I were broke college students with a young baby. We worked hard to afford our crabby little duplex, $600 a month, and necessities, while trying to finish our degrees to one day get ahead. Our duplex was one in an entire neighborhood owned by a large company and managed by a super sketchy married couple who lived on the same street. Before our kid was born, we did the normal excited new parent thing of painting his nursery and decorating blah blah blah. Our lease stated we needed permission to paint, which we obtained from the property manager, the husband of the couple. He insisted it would be fine, and being young and naive, we didn't get it in writing because he was so chill about it. So we paint and move on with our lives. A little while later, our lease was up and we had given notice to vacate as we were moving closer to my husband's school. The property manager was understanding, everything was fine, and we scheduled our move-out inspection. Prior to this inspection, we specifically asked him for the name of the paint color we needed to use when repainting the nursery. He flat out refused to give it, saying it was unnecessary to paint, as we've been there so long, they will be painting the whole duplex anyway. Okay, cool. Move-out inspection day comes and goes. We left the house in better shape than we found it, aside from a small area of torn carpet right along a seam in a doorway. The property manager inspected and said everything looked great, and we should get our whole deposit back, $400, minus a few bucks for the torn carpet. Sounds good, boss. Enter a period of weeks where we waited and waited for our deposit and eventually leaving messages upon messages with false promises or no return calls at all. Eventually, over a month later, this culminated in a phone call with the property manager where he said, and I remember this almost verbatim, "I don't know what you're so worried about anyway, it's only like $200 you're getting back." He cited the painted nursery and a huge mess left behind as deductions. And I coldly informed him we'd be going to court then because we didn't feel we owed him for those reasons. The place was spotless when we left, aside from the 6-pack of beer we left him in the fridge for being chill. Not 1 hour later he called back and miraculously our refund check had just shown up in the mail. Already knowing he was trying to screw us, we installed a recording app on my phone, one-party consent state, and went to the office. The check indeed was only for $200 of our deposit and included no list of what they charged us for important detail. We intentionally goaded him into admitting that he had told us not to paint and that the house looked great on move-out, and went on our happy way. Revenge plan already unfolding. We didn't cash the check and instead emailed the CEO of the entire property company, copying in the property manager and detailing the entire process. The CEO sent back a witty email with a cute little typed-up list of deductions, including all the things we were specifically told we wouldn't be on the hook for. A fun detail was that even by his own math, they owed us $230 of our deposit. No one really had an answer for why they then tried to issue a check for $200, but whatever. Joke was on him because we began digging through all the state regulations on security deposits and refunds, hoping to prove that our length of stay meant he couldn't charge us for wear and tear things like carpet cleaning and so on. And in our search, we instead happened upon a statute requiring landlords to return security deposits refunds and an itemized list of deductions within 30 days, or lose a right to withhold for actual damages and be subject to treble damages if the landlord is thought to be maliciously withholding the refund. So he typed up a demand letter for our entire security deposit, citing the statute, which he had broken because we didn't receive any refund offer or itemized list until 6 weekends later. And when he sent a witty reply, we filed in small claims court for our entire deposit plus treble damages and court costs. Now, I don't know if it's clear at this point, but I can be really petty if I feel like someone is trying to screw with me. And it was clear this guy made a career out of stealing money from low-income renters who likely could never afford to fight it. I was pissed. I spent the next months before our court date compiling all email correspondence in which he'd screwed himself over numerous times by providing written documentation that he exceeded time limits, charged incorrect amounts, and so on. I also compiled phone records showing dozens upon dozens of unanswered and unreturned calls to the property manager and detailed accounts I'd made immediately after hanging up on lies from the property manager. I printed out a screenshot from the company's own website detailing the CEO's role as a legal advisor, so I could innocently claim shouldn't he have known the statutes for these issues. I printed all the relevant statutes and highlighted the important parts. And then I made 3 copies of everything and nicely compiled each in a binder complete with sleeve protectors and page numbers. One for our own reference, one for the joke property manager and /or CEO, we weren't sure who would show up, and one for the judge himself. We also took our handy little recording of the property manager admitting to all the nonsense he lied about and then pretended to have never said. Needless to say, the judge laughed at how prepared we were, asked if we were law students, and then awarded us treble damages and court fees as well as interest. I will never forget the CEO's face when we looked over and smiled at him. All his crabby emails and disregard for the law were on the table, and rather than giving us the original $350 or so we were promised from our deposit, he ended up paying us over $1,300 a month later. It was glorious. Backstory: 25 years ago, my aunt passed away when I was a baby, leaving my 2 cousins who were both in their early 20s alone to fend for themselves. My grandparents, who were very wealthy, put a clause in their will that grandkids will receive half of their share of inheritance if a parent passes before the children reach the age of 30, and then the other half when my grandparents eventually passed. Both my cousins received a very sizable inheritance coupled with the money they got from selling my aunt's house. The younger of the 2 paid off her college loans and was able to buy property. She still lives on the same plot of land. The older sibling blew all of his money within 6 years. He was back to living in a condo, working as a police officer. Everyone in our small family knew he had a substance issue, so he was barely making ends meet with his officer salary and buying copious amounts of drugs. The next 4 years, my cousin went to rehab 3 times, sponsored by my grandparents. He sobered up after getting his girlfriend, now wife, pregnant. Absolutely a wretched woman. She saw my grandparents as payday and essentially baby-trapping my cousin, thinking it was her ticket. Within 7 years, they had 3 kids, so she just locked in tight. She's a nurse, and with 3 kids around, they always needed a little boost. Guess who they would always ask? You got it, my grandparents. Being the kind spirits they are, they always lended a hand. My father, mother, sister, and I got sick of it very quickly. My grandmother unfortunately passed away when I was 17, leaving my grandpa as the last remaining. I was undoubtedly my grandfather's favorite among the grandkids, which left a real sore spot in the mouth of my cousin and his wife. I had 2 more years at home before college, so I lived with my grandpa to keep him company and help take care of him. My cousin and his wife hated this, so much so that whenever they came to visit and I was not home, they would send their 3 gremlins into my room to destroy it. My room had double doors, so it couldn't be locked. This was a start. The longer I lived there, the more they would mess with me. My cousin even went as far as to place one of these little mechanical noisemakers in the cabinets in my room, the ones that play sounds at random intervals and make you think you're insane. Thankfully, my German Shepherd would always hear it, and after a week or so, she finally found it. They did this to distance me and deter me from taking care of Grandpa, so they could swoop in and be the heroes. This continued until one of the kids found my gun. By this time, I was 18 and in the possession of a firearm. I use quotations because my grandfather has guns, but cannot aim and shoot them anymore due to arthritis and nerve degeneration. So when I moved in, he placed all the weapons in my hands, should the need of self-defense arise. But should he see them out for any reason other than cleaning, there will be hell to raise. Being very well trained with guns and having a sense of pride in defending my home, I took this responsibility very seriously. I always kept a handgun in a locked container in my nightstand with the key on a high shelf out of reach from the gremlins. One fateful day, I am out getting my grandfather's food when I come home and my older cousin, his wife, and my grandfather are staring at a gun on the table. It was my gun that I kept in a lockbox. It was loaded and had a bullet chambered. I always keep a magazine in the lockbox but never load it into the gun. The lockbox was nowhere to be seen. My cousin claimed one of the children found the gun and was playing with it. I was 100% certain that he either found the key or broke the lockbox open to get to it and load it. As a 6-year-old would not be able to reach a key, I could barely figure out what it was to load my gun and chamber it. I tried my best to explain what my cousin had said was nonsense and that I never keep my firearms loaded in the house. But my cousin, who is a cop, scolded me on gun safety and threatened to have me arrested if I didn't leave and hadn't arrested me yet because we're family. I was asked to collect my belongings and go back to my parents. My cousin had won, or so he thought. The next day, I apologized to Grandpa and explained to him there was no way one of the kids could have gotten the key, and he agreed with me and he apologized, but he thought it's best if I move out until things cool down, and once they do, I will be welcome back home. Our relationship was a little fractured due to disinformation provided by my cousin. A month later, my grandfather died of a heart attack at 86. I was devastated. I was just beginning to get back into rhythm with him and rebuilding the trust that was somewhat shattered. To this day, I'm still unsure of what kind of man he saw me as due to my cousin. Immediately, my cousin and his wife began sucking up to my dad. As they had sealed payday with Grandpa, it was time to move on to the uncle. This persisted for a month or two. I wouldn't stand for it. Then came time for the will. My grandparents' lawyer read out the will to me, my father, mother, and sister in our home. Our 2 cousins will be briefed individually on their share of the estate per my grandparents' requests. Then a miracle line in the will comes to fruition. If anyone attempts to claim any part of the estate that is not assigned to them, they forfeit any assets they are supposed to receive and will be divided equally among the remaining family members. This was basically their way of saying, if you try to claim more than you're given, you get nothing. My father is supposed to receive every piece of physical property from my grandparents, as he's the only remaining child, aside from 2 or 3 items he set aside for me. The revenge. I hatched my plan. I called my cousin and told him all of my grandma's jewelry was to be donated to a charity auction. Grandma's collection of gems and metals was extensive to say the least. So a charity event wouldn't care if a few pieces didn't make it, right? It was a lure of gargantuan proportions that my greedy cousin could not resist. He bit right on it and headed over to my grandparents' house as soon as possible. Determined to snatch up as much as he could, a handful would send his kids to college. Regardless of what I said, the jewelry was never going to go to him anyways, so his actions were purely his own since none of it was destined to be his. Coincidentally, Dad was on his way with a lawyer to my grandparents' house to overlook everything. Formality stuff. According to my dad's testimony, my cousin had 3 shoe boxes worth of Grandma and Grandpa's jewelry piled on the kitchen counter, ready for loading into his car. My dad and the lawyer stood in the kitchen, wondering why it was all there when my cousin walked in from my grandparents' bedroom with a 4th and final shoebox. The jig was up and he put 2 and 2 together that I set him up, which was true. But there was no penalty against me for exploiting my cousin's greed, so he would screw himself over. It's worth noting that between the 18 years from my aunt's death and my grandpa's death, their wealth had increased several times over, so my cousin felt cheated and expected to receive just as much as my sister and I, despite receiving half of his already and blowing it. Throughout this whole ordeal, his younger sister, my other cousin, has not had a problem at all and is still weeping over Grandpa's death like the rest of us. However, just like that, my cousin lost enough money in the course of 30 minutes and made him contemplate his sanity over greed. My cousin's wife apparently filed for divorce a few weeks later. We haven't heard from him in nearly 6 years, as he's all but disgraced now.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.